A ballerina's perspective, from performing with New York City Ballet and Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater to publishing poetry books and mentoring kids and teens. Join us in a weekly discussion with experts to gain mental health clarity and achieve growth and moral consciousness. Give our show a 5 stars, comment, share, and come along for the ride. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast. Today we have Jason Jurado, a transformational coach, master practitioner of NLP, hypnotherapist, and founder of One Path Healing. He helps men and women in midlife move beyond good enough, living and reconnect with purpose, clarity, and authentic power. Blending neuroscience, mindfulness, hypnosis, and practical mindset tools, Jason guides clients to release limiting beliefs and build the inner foundation for meaningful success, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Wow, so beautiful. You're doing such amazing work for the soul, for the spiritual growth. And we actually connected on a kind of community podcast. We were doing a mental health talk panel with Jesper leading, and it was really, really interesting to kind of connect with so many people and how just to see how everybody had such a different experience in the mental health world. And I think that just says so much about how our collective consciousness is really shifting and expanding and growing. So thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on here. It's great. Like you said, we had met through a connection of a connection, and that's just the amazing thing about community. Is that we all come together and we all bring what we bring. And one of the things, thank you for the mentioning kind of who I am and what I do. And one of the things I like to say is that the work that I do is an art and a science. And that's what I love about it. I was born a healer. It just comes to me. That's who I am. That's since my first memories. Very long story, but basically that's who I was. But then at one point I said, well, I need a toolbox. I need something to know how to help people specifically. That's when I started with neurolinguistic programming and timeline and hypnosis, etc. And I also love the technical aspect of it. When we had talked a little bit about me joining you on the show, it was like, okay, yeah, that'd be great. What are we going to talk about? So I started kind of thinking about, your background, your world, my world, how they connect. And I think that, we have that mutual connection of intention. And I think that's exciting because it shows up in both of our worlds in so many different ways. So I'm interested, I love to join you today to talk about that.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. And I think even having the different age groups, like you're a Gen X and I'm millennial,
Yeah.
and there are so
Yeah.
many different ways that we were brought up. I think even when it comes to like emotional health, resilience, we could talk a little bit about that even. Like I know myself
Yeah.
growing up, there's so much talk, there's so much emphasis on like, let's begin the conversation of talking, healing, expressing yourself. I even opened up a somatic online ballet dance class for people to get in touch with their emotions through the body, because sometimes it's so hard to talk,
Right.
especially when you haven't been doing it for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's so important. We talk in cliches sometimes about body, mind, spirit, but it's true. When you break it down past the taglines and the quick posts and things of that nature, it is what it's all about. Semantics, somatics, language and physical body all come together, and it brings us together to coming back home. That's what healing is that's when I talk about healing it. It's about coming back to yourself, coming back home and finding that place. And yes, generationally, so much difference. Blessed that now they're having these conversations, and that people are talking about it. But yeah, you mentioned a buzzword for me, and that's resilience. And people talk about like, oh, kids are so resilient. And what I say to that is, but at what cost? Because usually when people are talking about resilient, they're talking about what my generation and then somewhat your generation was like, suck it up, just deal with it, just take it. Boys don't cry, don't be hysterical, that horrible saying. And so, but resilience is about having the tools to handle things in a way that helps you best process them in a positive way, not just stuffing it down and putting it away. It's about dealing with life and having the tools to be able to process these things and to say no, first of all. Saying no is very important. And that's the one thing where it's like, as you come up, you're told, well, don't, you just take it and just say what you're going to do, what you got to do, and whatever. And it's like, now people are realizing, no, that's not helping anyone. And so resilience at what cost? Resilience in a positive way at the cost of positive mental health, good communication, and great relationships, which is so important.
That is amazing and is so true, especially for the men growing up these days and learning, also relearning how to deal with their emotions, the kind of the
Right,
overflow and the overwhelm of it all. And I think it's like so many men are searching for that deeper connection and meaning through their emotion because now they're realizing the value of emotion. They're not suppressing it anymore. They're not, they're choosing self love and self respect, which takes a lot of courage, especially when they were taught otherwise. So many men
right,
in cultures, communities were taught obviously the weakness of that, the shame of that, the
right.
lack of that. And actually, this is a huge part of the spiritual mastery of rising above the subconscious mind of lack and trauma and all the regression of the past and choose the self, which makes for beautiful friendship relationship leaders. Talk a little bit about the impact of men having to take on this role and be kind of like the warriors.
It's so true, and strength is a word that gets thrown around, and people think about, well, it's weak, strength and weakness obviously would be the polars on that, and where people say, oh, well, it's weakness to ask for help. No, true true strength comes from being able to ask for help, and the one thing I'd mentioned, we were talking about emotions, that emotions aren't bad. Emotions are just signals. Emotions are telling you there's something to be aware of. And when we start to make the turn on that, when we stop thinking about, emotions as good or bad, and just realize it's just telling you something. And where does it come? You talked about the subconscious mind. In my world, we call it the unconscious mind. Same thing, just, different, a little bit different language. But yeah, our subconscious, unconscious mind is what drives us, is what takes us to where we want to go. And if we're not hearing it, one of my mentors has a saying. He says, life throws ping pong balls before it throws bowling balls. And emotions, that's emotions, right? Something makes you a little upset and you're like, oh, and you push it down, you don't pay attention to it. It's going to keep coming back until you hear that message. And so until you stop and sit and say, okay, unconscious or subconscious mind, what are you trying to tell me? What is the lesson I need to hear? Then you can stop learning that lesson. Then you can proceed. Then you can let it go. And that's when puts you in a place of strength.
Yes, that is so true and so beautifully said. The lessons we each on a soul level, it's so interesting to kind of receive that because there is so much anxiety and fear kind of to first witness that and to first understand like what the lessons are because oftentimes we want to run away from that. We want to reduce the stress of incoming energy, emotion, all these things, especially
Right.
for spiritual empaths. There's this kind of like pressure to kind of show up to do the work, which is
Right.
beautiful. And I think more and more people are learning the value of choosing growth at your own pace, and like it doesn't have to be a competition because I know people really want to strive to like achieve and win and do all the great things, and obviously there's a perfectionism mindset there. If you're ready to shake off that daily stress, come join us for online beginner adult ballet and yoga classes each week to connect with the flow of movement and the art of ballet into perfect synergy. Come as you are and learn to love your body a little bit more and gain strength and flexibility with each class. All are welcome. Sign up at balletartsmovement@gmail.com. First class free. And sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be challenging. How do you deal with like emotional overwhelm? Do you have any like rituals or routines to kind of help reduce stress and bring you back to presence?
It's funny you mention that because I'm in the process right now. And, with having my own business, with helping people, I work with caregivers. I work with an organization called Yellow Cares, and I work with caregivers. I work with parents who are caregivers for their kids because they lost the other parent. I'm a caregiver for my father. I'm a caregiver for my wife to an extent, emotionally, another story. And then with my business, seeing people, burnout shows up. and you talk about, you can't pour from an empty pitcher, and you help and you teach people, but you have to do it yourself. And so I find I'm an introvert. I am a huge introvert. I have to go inside to process my world. I think we talked about that on when we met last time. And so for me, what it is, it's about getting away. So I'm in California. I'm close to Sacramento now, but I lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, for a lot of years. And there's a beautiful beach out there called Half Moon Beach, and that's kind of my place of peace. And at least once a year, now it's only about 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away, but once a year I go on, what the Australians call a walkabout. And I go back and I go to the beach and I go to the old places and I just decompress by myself. And I just, my wife will text a little bit, but it's pretty much off limits. And then now, at the end of this month, I'm actually going up to the northern coast of California, which is about 5 hours away. And to answer your question directly, how do I do it? I get away. I go out in nature. I reconnect to what's most important. I connect to, and whether you call that God, source, spirit, creator, nature, whatever that is, it's good to reconnect to that. And that's what I do. Even if I just take a walk and I go outside, I live in an area that's pretty rural, and I can go see the trees, I can see the fields, I can see the mountains right by me. And that's what I do, is I get back into nature. I reconnect to that source and remember that, I'm a wave in the ocean and I am connected to something greater. And that's what grounds me, and that's what really helps me release anything that I'm holding on to.
I love that. That is so poetic, so beautifully said. It's the simplicity of it is like just finding somewhere to stand still and integrate and observe.
Right,
It is so true. I know, like, once we're having like spring start, there's trees, flowers, little buds, birds. You can actually hear a louder frequency of birds. It's so interesting. Just
right,
if you pay attention, literally just like a fraction of a second, you hear it, you feel more inspired to just be present, and then you learn new things about your environment, yourself. And I think that's the goal, like to learn more about your space and how you can appreciate that and have gratitude for that is also really helpful in the healing or recovery journey. And actually today is World Health Day, so how cool that we're
yeah,
taking part in appreciate acknowledging health and mental health, because so often mental health was not deemed so, priority based, and now we're taking back that awareness that it's so crucial to actually understand the value of mental health and to implement strategies to help all people, even kids, teens. They need that as well. I know, like, anytime we do a class when it comes to ballet, so many kids just are craving for that excitement and for that
right,
ability to connect with themselves and the space they're given. So it's so interesting how the mood shifts when you're doing something that's just fun. Oh,
right,
obviously it's great if it's like productive and it has some kind of like physical component, but it's
right.
like there's something about the movement of the body and doing something that brings you joy that takes you to a different dimension, and it kind of gives you that fuel to find meaning and gratitude, I think.
Yeah, it's so important. I was thinking is, you were saying something before, and the challenge with our world is that people are flawed. And so we have these people that gave us a lot of insight, a lot of stuff, but that they were humans too, and their human side showed up. And I just mentioned that because I'm going to quote Gandhi, and there's issues there. But to paraphrase, he said there's more to life than increasing its speed. And that's kind of what we do, is we're always in a hurry to get somewhere, go somewhere, accomplish something, whatever. And that's the beauty of, like, the work that you do, is being in the body. Because when you're fully in the body, I also teach mindfulness and meditation, and that's about being present. Because you can speak to this better than I can, of course, about being a dancer. If you're not present in your body, it's not going to work out, right? And you don't always have to be perfect, but you have to be in your body to know, so you don't hurt yourself, don't hurt someone else if you're working around other people. And that just helps ground you. And so finding that moment to be present in yourself and take you out of worrying about what's later, what's coming up, what happened before, that's a beautiful place to be. And that's one, amazing way to accomplish it is somatics, is just being present in your body. And the more we can do that, the more we can be present in nature because we are part of nature, right? So it just all feeds into the same thing.
100%. Yes, exactly. I think when we're present, we also acknowledge parts of our shadow self, or we sit with it. We're
Right.
kind of like forced to embrace it.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting how, like, our perceptions of limitations are revealed to us so strongly in those moments. Like, I know personally, like, going through experiences when I'm performing or when I'm working on a choreography, the more I move my body, the more I'm kind of like relearning, or I'm actually healing sometimes. We have seen some students actually cry in class
Yeah.
because how their body is channeling, or how the movement is opening up spaces in their body that haven't been opened before. It's really, really fascinating how they start to open up their psyche, and
Right.
things are revealed to them from their childhood, from different traumas, whatever limitations have been maybe holding them back, known or unknown. Sometimes we have limitations that are actually unknown. We just have
Right.
certain fears come up on certain things, whether we keep a pattern in toxic behaviors, toxic friendships, relationships, and sometimes we don't even see it. So doing something that brings you into presence and brings you into this kind of like spiritual healing, it's so amazing. Like, I love doing rituals during like new moons, full moons. Everybody cries, everybody
Right.
has their emotions, everybody's like embracing them, and truths come out during those times, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it just comes from settling in and being present. We push so many, you were talking earlier about pushing things away, pushing emotions away, pushing feelings away, pushing thoughts away. And once again, a flawed person that gave us some good stuff is Freud. And he has, to paraphrase him, he says that, when you push emotions away, they're only going to come back in worse ways later. To paraphrase it, but that's what happens. It shows up. It's not going to be ignored. It's not going to be whatever. And to your point, I have friends that are massage therapists, and they share that that a good percentage of the times their clients end up crying through the massage. It's releasing these things. And I mentioned before about we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but they're connected because this human experience, this human body is what connects us to this physical world. And if we forget that, we lose a big part of it. And they did, just real quick, I know this is a little tech geeky, but I'm a science nerd.
Yes.
Penfield, a doctor, scientist and doctor, kind of the same thing, I guess. But in the 1950s, he was doing work on the brain, and they were checking pieces of the brain. And the thought back then was that memories lived in the brain. And he actually did an experiment where he had this person that they touched a certain part of the brain, I forget where it was at, and it brought up a memory from this woman, and she's in her 50s, of when she was 2 years old, and she remembered the smells of being there and the feeling and all that stuff. And so they thought that was it. We have since learned that memories are stored completely through our bodies, and different memories are in all through our entire body. And so that's like when you do movement, when you have massage, it releases these things that you've been held up. There's another science, that a modality that I'm trained in, called meta medicine, and it has to do with all dis-ease comes from a physical or an emotional event. And those emotional events, depending on what they are, it goes deeper than that, but they get trapped in certain parts of your body. So if you have a certain ailment, you go backwards and go, okay, well, you have this pain in this area on this side of your body. That most likely means you're dealing with this kind of conflict with this person. And then you can go backwards and help that person release that. But it's all body and mind, which then leads us to spirit.
That's so beautiful. Yes, it's such an integrative journey, and so delicate, and so,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's so also like opening up your channels of like intuition and self-reflection. It's like a fully spiritual experience. And being the founder of
Yeah.
One Path Healing, tell us a little bit about that, and how if hypnotherapy kind of plays a role in that, or is that like a separate thing? Very interesting.
No, definitely. Yeah, I know folks, and I have a lot of peers, and I know people that are in this world, and some of them are, they study everything, and bless them. That's just for them. They study all these modalities, and did you read this book and that book and this book? And I study a lot and I read a lot, but for me, what works for me is everything has to be complementary. Everything has to make sense. So all the modalities that I've studied and I've learned all have to make sense within the context of who I am as a healer. And I'll just say this, being a healer, I don't do anything to anybody. I am a simple tour guide. I help them on their journey. I help them observe, find out where they're at, and they're aware, have awareness of where they're at, and then help them discover where they want to go. And then together we can help build that path to get them there. And so, and I'm going to step back one more second. So one path, people ask me, does that mean there's only one path to healing? No, that's not it. You have a path. The we're all, Ram Dass, it comes from a Ram Dass saying. Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. And wherever you believe that is where it is. Between whatever religion, spiritual, whatever experience you're having, that's where it is. So I call that the top of the mountain. So we're all going to the top of the mountain. There's many paths to the top of that mountain, though. If you've ever seen a mountain, there's not just one trail that gets you to the top. You find that path that works for you, and that's what you go on. And that's what I do with people. And so that's what my journey has been about, helping others find that path that works for them. And then once they discover it, they get on that path, and then they go from there.
That's amazing. And actually, just watching the news recently about the astronauts in space, they're finding mountains on the moon. So there are the ways that we find oneness is like incredible. And I
Yeah,
think the whole purpose of oneness is people want to feel one, whole, unified together,
right,
whether it's within themselves, within their families, friends, work, just within their space. I think, of course, that is the ultimate goal, because then you have that mental health clarity, you have that fulfillment. Everybody is chasing things, everybody is competing with things, subconsciously trying to run away from something because they don't
right.
feel whole. Once you feel whole, I feel
Yeah,
like it's so much easier, not always easier, but it's a little bit easier to kind of like realign with your passion. Because I know myself, when I was a teenager and I was rebellious, I didn't fully understand my purpose, and I was confused, and I was, traveling, going different places, not sure who my friends are that I can trust. It's a very confusing time. Do you have any advice for the youth, maybe for your teenage self as well, who are on this journey of spirituality, healing, and how to kind of become more one?
this sounds cliche, but be yourself and discover who you are on your own terms. You know, I have a silly saying, and this can, I used to always say that people want to be different like everybody else. When we're growing up as kids, we're independent and we're experiencing our own experience and whatever, but you dress just like everyone in your group and you all listen to the same music, but you're all rebelling. And it's like, well, you're rebelling together, just so you know that, right? And that's wonderful. That's how we grow. It's called socialization, right? That's how we figure things out. We try these things on. We try these different things, and don't be afraid to experiment. Here's the advice I give. Bottom line, to answer your question, and I use this all the time. Have a curious and flexible mindset. Be open to that there's other ways of doing things, there's other things out in the world, and then be flexible enough to, when you learn a new way, to be able to try it on and go, that might be right. I'm not stuck in my ways. So being open to learning new ways, and then when new ways show up, having the ability to change and go, you know what? Maybe that's not my favorite thing. I don't love just sports, or I don't love just poetry. I don't love just this. I can love both of them. And so when you have a curious and flexible mindset, it'll take you wherever you want to go. And having that beginner in Zen, we talk about the beginner's mind. Always, never be too cool. I lived in San Francisco for a lot of years, and I saw a lot of people who were too cool to enjoy San Francisco. well, I've been here forever and I'm this. And I'm like, well, have you ever gone to Alcatraz? No. Have you ever walked across the Golden Gate Bridge? No. That's a tourist thing. I am always a tourist. I always want to see something new. I always want to see the splendor and the amazement of the world. It's such an awe-filled place. Why would you limit yourself because you're too cool for that? So be open to these new experiences, experience them, and your path will show up. Just by taking those steps, you'll all of a sudden look around and go, wait a minute, I'm on my journey. This is it. And that's a great place to be.
So much wisdom there. I absolutely love it. Yes. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming on the podcast and sharing with us
Yeah.
your transformational ways of being and healing and recovering and showing up. What a gift. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you and see all of your content?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn under my name, Jason Jurado. And I'm on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, but you can reach me at onepathhealing@gmail.com. I love to hear from folks. I am not one. I'm a sole proprietor. It's me, myself, and I. So if it's, who sees the clients? Jason. Who takes out the trash? Jason. Who sweeps the floors? On and on. So I answer all those emails, all that information I get. Please, I love to hear from folks. Reach out to me. I'll answer a question if I can. We do connections. So, all words, all spelled out, onepathhealing@gmail.com. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.